Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 135, and it's going to be called The Painter and the Painting, and this is going to be part of the Connections continuity. So, I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. The painting stretched out in front of me, 5 meters wide and 3 tall. I began it at the valley it depicts, but then, as is my method, I took it back to my studio to finish. And now, it nearly was. I stood back as far as I can in my studio. The details all seemed perfect. The valley was detailed, clear, beautiful. It almost looked like a window back to that place. I saw one small detail that didn't quite hit my eye right. I went forward, prepared my brush, and barely touched it up. I backed up again and saw that it was perfect. Time to sign. I will put my thumb in some light brown paint. I want this to be discernible, but not to clash completely, and after swabbing a quick P with my brush, I'll put my thumbprint next to it. My last initial is a C rather than O, but the paint leaves a nice thumbprint that is difficult to counterfeit. The major galleries have good close pictures of the proper thumbprint. As an additional protection, I will go to the back side and make several more marks with the exact same paint. These will be noted for records, but will not be shown or visible to the general public. So, even if some crafty hack with a 3D printer manages to duplicate my thumbprint, you won't be able to make the back markings correct. I swipe the P with a brush, then get a good amount of paint on the pad of my right thumb. As soon as I put my thumb to the painting, I felt something strange. It was as though a vacuum cleaner was stuck on my thumb and pulling on it very hard. "Shit!" I yelled and tried to pull away, but it pulled harder. Then I was inside. I looked down. The painting was real, all around me, though oddly small. I could take a few steps and touch the stream running down the middle of the valley if I wished. But I did not wish. First of all, I wasn't sure what was going on, and I didn't know if moving would hurt things. Second of all, I didn't want to damage my painting. Looking behind me, I saw my studio, as though I were outside and looking in through a window a few steps away, except that on all sides of the window was just more landscape, which I recognized as being that of the valley I'd originally visited, and then thought about while I finished the painting. Am I hallucinating, I wondered? Had I been drugged? Or was I having an episode of some kind? But it didn't seem so. I carefully lifted up one foot. The grass underneath seemed not bent down like normal grass, but smeared like paint. I didn't know how much damage I could do to my painting, but I knew I wanted out. I supposed I could try leaping out, but I didn't know if I could do it safely. I tested putting my arm out, and it stopped at the plane of the painting. That gave me a jolt. But then I looked very carefully at the plane and saw that while most of it was quite invisible, down at the lower left corner, which would be the lower right corner if I was in my studio, there was a backwards F and my thumbprint. And on my hand was paint. It was not on my right thumb's pad, but my left. Hoping that this would work, I put my left thumbprint up against the thumbprint. It did. I felt the same strange pulling sensation, and then I was in my studio, looking at the paint on my right thumb. But in the painting, the paint was definitely on my left thumb, and it felt very natural to press that thumb to the paint. Was I a mirror image of myself inside the painting? All I knew was that I was enthralled. I had to try this again. I could hardly do the work necessary to archive my landscape and prepare it for sale. While I was doing these mundane things, my mind raced ahead to what I should be doing. As soon as I was done with that, and it was late into the night, I got another canvas out. This one was smaller than my landscape, but still good-sized. I prepped with a straight edge and pencil and got out the beige paint. I used a lot of it, but the idea was very simple: create a straightforward room that I could go into and explore. If this works, I thought, I wonder what else I could do. Actually, I thought, even if all I can do is go into a painting and back out, I will be the most famous artist ever. Well, perhaps, I thought. A lot of people won't think I've actually gone into the painting. They'll think it's a stage magician's trick of some kind. But of course I could have them inspected as closely as they like. They will find no trick. But then again, will this work again? Maybe I shouldn't let my landscape go quite yet. After all, if it only works in that painting, that will be the one I will have need of. Plus, I don't know exactly why it worked. Maybe this next painting won't have that property. Maybe no painting ever will again. Should I try again on the landscape? Yes. I put my thumb to the thumbprint and again was sucked into the painting. Relieved, I turned around, stepped up, and put my mirrored thumb again to the thumbprint. So it worked again. This gave me hope. I returned to my new canvas with gusto. Still, simple as it was, it took me days to complete. In the end, it was in some ways harder to make realistic than the landscape, with its abundance of details. I was making visible a plain room, 4 lines of perspective going in straight to a back wall. The paint was subtly shaded to show the distance, the corners, and so on. I painted it as though the canvas itself were the light source, the window onto the scene. I took my time now, making everything just so. It had to look real, or at least I believe so, as that was the most striking thing about my landscape. In the end, I stepped back and saw that was right. I saw what looked like the view of a room. No walls or doors, no adornments, just a floor, walls, and ceiling. All of the same beige color, though subtly shaded to indicate the joinings and distance. I moved around, and it certainly seemed almost like the room was real on the other side of the canvas, though without the parallax that should happen if one moves one's head. Part of me wants to do this tonight, but I think it would be better to wait until the paint is dry. I still remember the squashed paint grass, which even now I see checking is faintly visible on the sole of my shoe. The next morning, and I am ready. The plan is to go in, feel around just a bit, and immediately come back out using the thumbprint. I will also explore my body a little. Is it truly mirror imaged when I'm inside the painting? And then I will immediately come back out. Darling, this is a copy of Paul J. Carter's last journal entries, which I have quietly made. It ends just as you read here, very abruptly. Paul is missing. His last landscape was, in fact, going to be sold to our museum. So I was called in to answer some questions and also to help them investigate. I have authenticated his thumbprint on both the landscape and the room painting. The room painting, by the way, does not have his usual back of painting markings. Presumably he would have done these, but was too carried away by his interest in stepping into his work. This means that Paul Carter went missing in a fairly specific time frame between the completing of his painting and when he would have put his final markings on the back, which usually happens no more than a day after he considers it completed. The police are treating these journal entries as nothing more than artistic flights of fancy, or perhaps a trick, setting up his disappearing, possibly to become more famous. I think their belief is that he's not dead or permanently gone, and that is partly responsible for my being allowed so far into their investigation. As you've no doubt intuited by my bothering you with this, I think Paul Carter had developed, rather late, as he was in his 30s, a power. Or perhaps he had always had the power, but it simply hadn't worked for him until the landscape painting. I can only speculate, but given that he was only planning on a quick trip into his room painting, I believe he may have been trapped inside there. The landscape, was based on him taking a trip somewhere. The room was straight from his imagination. Perhaps his imagination failed him in some way. Perhaps he went in, but his imaginary room did not offer a way out. Or perhaps when he went in, it was incomplete and he fell, or went through the floor, or otherwise was unable to reach the thumbprint exit again. In any case, I think this is an interesting case. I know a little about his situation, and I believe his will is going to have his estate given to nonprofits, as he had no close family and was known to support several local artistic and charitable causes. I know he was very invested in his growing fortune as an artist, and it is unlikely that he will have died intestate. I believe that we should make an investment in his room painting. Though the price will be driven up by the fact that it is his last work, it will be capped by the fact that it is extremely minimalist, not at all in vogue, and also extremely distant from his usual works. This is, in fact, his only interior painting. Many will, in fact, claim it is incomplete, due to it having no marks on the reverse, even though it is thumbprinted, something he never did until his work was considered complete. Who knows? Perhaps we'll be able to rescue Mr. Carter, or at least discover more about his fate. I hope that he is not dying of thirst or asphyxiation even now. It is over a day since the date on his last entry. I have a hopeful thought that perhaps he is in limbo, and even after the inevitable delay before the painting is ours, he might be saved. Let's have a Greek salad tonight. All my love. See you soon. And that's the story. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2020, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.